Hey, I finally watched Woodstock '99
Oh yeah,
last week.
okay,
No, the Netflix one. I haven't seen the
yeah,
other one. I'm not sure what
yes.
that one's on. So what's the
Trainwreck,
the Trainwreck? That's right.
Woodstock '99.
And foremost in my mind was your question of when would you have left the
Yes.
festival, which I
Okay, when
think
would
is a
you have
brilliant
left? That's good. Yes.
end of day two. I think because day one goes relatively okay. That's
Hmm.
before, like, it's been one hot day.
Mm.
You've had one vaguely threatening performance by Korn,
Hmm.
but even most of the people in the interview said, actually it went off pretty well. We realized it was a different vibe. But day two, when it's like 40 plus degrees, you've had one day of like drinking and drug taking. So you're coming down, you're feeling a bit
Hmm.
shit, can't find any shade. A slice of pizza is costing you $15. A bottle of water is costing you $12.
Mm.
I think by day two, and then the day was it prior to Limp Bizkit or during Limp Bizkit that the fucking the tower comes down, one of the sound towers. I can't remember if it was prior or during, but I think after that show, I would have been like, yeah, I think that's enough. I think there was actually a girl in the documentary who said we've just packed up after night
Mm.
two and got out of there. I think that's
After they ripped down the sand tower, yeah, I would have heard about that at home. My friends would have still been there and been like, "You would not believe what happened tonight. They tore down the sound tower because the minute there was no clean water and people were dancing around in sewage, I would have been out of
that
it."
was day
Nah,
three,
they
I
were in
think.
no day two. There was already like the water was pretty fucked by day two.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, so I remember Rage Against the Machine doing Big Day Out in
yeah.
like 2008. When is it Flemington? I think
Hmm.
you were there.
I was there.
Um, and people were scaling
Yeah,
the camera towers there as well. Do you remember that? There was like a
yeah,
bunch of people climbing the towers. And I remember
yeah.
that thinking it was pretty hairy. But my concern was more that this drunk idiot's going to fall off and
Yeah,
die.
hurt themselves. Not that they were going
Yeah,
to tear the tower
tear
down
the tower down.
and then set it on fire.
I mean, it's amazing. I went into this documentary assuming, because I'd heard a lot about it and the other documentary, that it's like, oh, okay, this is going to be like a damning indictment
Mm.
on, young white males. They ruin everything. But I didn't come out of it feeling like, I feel like that was like an element of it, but I
Mm.
feel like
It was a pretty decent element of it. Like it was
it's
a huge
yeah,
through line, but it wasn't the only
they
thing.
they weren't the only thing. I think that they were the foot soldiers for a very corrupt system.
Yeah.
Like they basically were just the SS of this fucking completely corrupt music festival that was trading off the brand name of a hippie love-in.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine, because I went to the Guns N' Roses concert that was probably the most
Mm.
equivalent in terms of
Yes.
once you got locked into this, barren space with no
Yeah.
shade in 40 degrees and they start charging you water. So I got it. Like I remember I was 15 when I went to the Guns N' Roses concert, and this was back before kids. You got to remember there was a time when bottled water wasn't a thing. Like
No.
if you wanted a drink, you just drank from the tap. And so in 1993 or whenever it was, 94 to 1993, to be somewhere where someone's telling you, hey, you can't drink from a tap, you've got to pay $5 for a bottle of water, that seemed insane to us.
Am
And
I like, are we missing an opportunity here? Because this Woodstock 99 documentary, I mean, both of them, this one gives you more of a sense of like that it was still kind of fun. Like what I quite liked about this was because they have a whole bunch of people who were there that were like, it gave a real sense of why people stayed, that they were still felt like they were part of something, that even though things were going terribly, it was like
they survived it.
they survived it, right? And they
Yeah.
like kind of have that memory. You're right. That Guns N' Roses show is absolutely the equivalent of that. You were there. Is there
Yeah.
a documentary in that? Surely there's like a Woodstock 99 style documentary in that Guns N' Roses gig there.
There
Because
was a big retrospective article written in the Age about
Yeah.
4 or 5 years ago where they went and sat down with like 5 or 6 different people who were involved in it. But there could be. I don't think it was there's not as many flashpoints as there were. Like the Woodstock is heaps darker. Like as far as I know, there weren't like a bunch of like assaults and stuff happening Guns
No,
N'
but
Roses.
I still imagine there was some pretty, like, I mean, because kids were drinking out of puddles and stuff, and like, you know,
I was one of them.
Yeah.
I remember finding because the other thing that fucked up with Guns N' Roses was like getting in and out was really badly
Yeah.
organized. So it's just like a few shuttle buses leaving from Flinders Street Station for I don't know how many 50,000 people. And so we were meant to leave. The show finished at midnight or 1 or whatever it was, and then we were there till like 6 a.m. And I remember like just lying on the mud and finding like a half-buried bottle of something and just being like, I'm going to fucking drink this. I don't know what, I'm so thirsty. I don't know what was in it. And just drank this. Could have been urine for all I knew, which is probably Will. Why? I now refuse to wait.
Can I ask you the question about the Red Hot Chili Peppers playing the song Fire? So they go out there.
Yes.
And things are on fire. And they choose to play the song Fire. Discuss.
It was an odd choice. And it's an odd choice too, considering like when they were off stage, they had to take a break when all the fires broke out and the organizer was like, hey, can you go out and settle down the crowd? I did think that was strange because I got confused. I thought that like in my understanding of what happened was that they were one of the good guys that went out and were like, hey, you know, everyone just chill out. But it didn't seem like it.
No, it did not seem like that at all.
What about the Fatboy Slim story where he's playing and then these guys come in? They've come in
just drive. They stole a bus, drive into a crowded like rave, like rave tent in a bus.
It does. Like I've always said about The Simpsons, like what I think they do better than any other show is satirize mob mentality, like how quickly things descend when there are like no rules. And that's what it felt like, was just like when people feel like there is no consequences, they'll go crazy.
I mean, it was, I mean, like that moment where you're like, let's steal that bus. And now let's drive it into the fucking rave tent while Fatboy Slim is playing is, I mean, it's not people thinking straight. It's fair to say.
So if you're the artist, rather than, okay, you're a punter, if you're Fatboy Slim, like at what point, if you're not being threatened physically, like no one's throwing bottles at you or anything like that, but you can sort of see, God, there's a lot of people in here and I can't see a lot of security and stuff. Do you just go, oh, well, I guess I know what they're doing? Or at some point, do you turn to someone and say, hey, like, I don't know, we should keep playing?
Well, I mean, I thought what you could see from him was what the conundrum would have been as an artist, which was, I think we've got to stop playing because this is a dangerous situation. But if I stop playing, is this going to become a much more dangerous situation? Yeah. Because it feels like me playing might be the only thing that is keeping some of these people from burning this entire place down.
I felt like I identified with him the most because, like, I always give people the benefit of the doubt. Like, I very rarely think things are going to go shit. And so when he saw that van driving into the crowd, his brain initially went to, oh, I guess they have a mobile dancing platform.
Yeah. This is fun. What a fun thing they're doing here at Woodstock. You can apparently just drive a van into a crowd. This is rad. This place is going off. All right. Right like, about now.
That's what I would have done as well. But yeah, it's just that I could imagine being there on the first day, because it did look quite cool on the first day with, everything was open and clean and before the rubbish came. But it's amazing that within 3 days, like what had happened, like some of that footage of them driving in the day after the last day, where it's just like completely dystopian, just like smoking ruins and stuff like that. Are you claiming insurance on that? Like, are you insured for riots if you're Woodstock 99?
I mean, I don't even know how that works.
Because there'd be some kind of culpability, right? Like the owners of that Air Force base must be like, hang on. Like, I mean, to have an airport hangar.
Yeah, they're like, we've been to war zones. And this
Yeah.
is not appropriate. Like, we will go to other countries, but we always leave our area tidier than when we found it.
I mean, I do remember in 1999 hearing about Woodstock 99, and like it's, you know, my memory of it was more like Rolling Stone articles saying, oh, it's like a crass commercialization of the spirit of Woodstock, and they're
Which it certainly
using it.
was.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the irony of it being on an Air Force base, you know, peace and love on an Air Force base. And who's the dude, the organizer who did the original one and then he's come back? You know, the guy, he's all like, he's one of those fake hippies where he's like, oh yeah, he's like Steve Jobs. He's like, yeah, I'm a hippie, but you know, he's obviously just an ardent capitalist.
Well, you know what so there's two guys in particular from the original Woodstock, right? So there's the hippy dippy, long haired, you know,
Curly head guy, yeah.
curly haired dude, you know, like you said, he's got that very much that Steve Jobs sort of, you know, ethereal, you know, hippie for humanity, but clearly trying to make a heap of money. And then there's the other dude, the one who's interviewed a lot more, you know, and like should stop talking, should stop being in these documentaries, because every time he opens his mouth, he makes the situation worse. Like, he says things out loud that he, like, A, shouldn't be saying, but if he is saying, should only be saying behind closed doors. Like, he's the one who's constantly, every time they bring up like sexual assaults, you know, mentions that, yeah, but the women had their tops off. And you're like, yeah, but again, why is someone letting you say this out loud? Why did you agree to be part of this documentary?
Yeah, and then it's like the Limp Bizkit of it all. Like, there's one journalist who, I think he was the young videographer at the time in '99.
So this is what's cool about this version. If you've only seen the documentary version, the other version is this one obviously is told through the eyes of a lot of people who were there in the first place. And a lot of these people have footage, whether it was like personal footage that they were taking, or in this case, like they were journalists working on, you know, like the actual event, and they have like footage from the time and could tell the story. I thought that was really compelling about this version of it.
Yeah. And so one of the videographers, he's sort of telling, because the flashpoint was, I guess, day 2 when Limp Bizkit played their set, and that's when everything fucking went crazy. And he word for word repeats like Fred Durst's little preamble before break stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, because they keep cutting back and forth between Fred saying it, him saying it. I'm like, oh my God, like how significant was this moment in your life that you have like memorized these words? But watching it again, I sort of feel like, yeah, but it's Limp Bizkit. Like, you invited Limp Bizkit to this show. Like, Limp Bizkit just did what Limp Bizkit do. I'm not saying that, you know, Fred Durst couldn't have gone out and calmed the crowd down, but what do you expect?
Yeah, it's not.
He's
not Sting.
No,
he's not the man for a calm this situation down scenario, right? Like, yeah, you bought, like that's. I agree with that. That, like, you are expecting someone to not be what they are. The problem is that you had Limp Bizkit. It's not like they. Well, this is the difference between, like, what's the song called? Break? Is it called Break Things? Break stuff.
Break
right?
Stuff.
Like, at least that's their song. You knew they had that song. They were probably going to play that song. They probably played that song at every other live gig that they've done. They played Break Stuff, right? So, like, that's the Red Hot Chili Peppers. They did a cover of Fire. That's not even their song, guys. Like, I mean, you don't need to drop this one in. No one's going to miss it.
And how's Gavin Rossdale coming out after Korn? Korn tear up the first night, and then little shirtless Gavin Rossdale comes out with his fake Pearl Jam band Bush to do that set. I actually was like, I had such a moment of cringe when it's like, oh no, like here comes shirtless Gavin Rossdale onto, like, the crowd is so fired up after Korn. And out comes Gavin Rossdale and Bush to play, and they open with one of their sappy kind of like soft rock songs. I was like, oh God, is this when it happens? Is this when the crowd goes crazy?
That's what I thought was going to happen. But actually,
me too.
Like, that's what I thought that story was going to be. And then, like, and I am now the guy who plays Gavin Rossdale because Gavin Rossdale was killed by white teenagers that day. That's what I thought this was actually going to be like. But I actually came out of that with a little bit more respect for Gavin Rossdale. I was like, you
calmed him down.
Calmed them down. I mean, you actually did the response. You, as opposed to so many other people over the weekend who had an opportunity to do the right thing, you went and out there and tried to do the right thing.
Well, I thought this was a really telling moment when they're backstage with MTV, Limp Bizkit comes straight off, and like one of the first things that Fred Durst says is, "It's not our fault."
Yeah.
Like, I didn't do it. It's the I didn't do it, kid.
It's the first thing that you have to say is, "It's not our fault. I don't know what's going on. None of this has anything to do with me. No, I didn't sing a song about breaking stuff. Absolutely, I did not."
Yeah, or telling all the kids in the crowd to gather up all that negative energy and just let it out.
Yeah. It's not my fault.
Yeah, man. It's I didn't get as anxious as I thought I was going to, because I'd heard a lot of stories about it, and I'm like, oh, like I found the Fire Festival documentary more anxiety inducing. Like the idea of being at Fire Festival, I thought
I feel like the
a lot
original
worse for me.
documentary is more anxiety inducing than this series, because with this series, because it's just told at a slightly different pace, you have that breakdown of other people telling their individual stories and their own takes on it, that it doesn't feel as like that first initial documentary. When I watched that, I was like, it really did fuck with me. I was like, I don't think I could ever go to a music festival again based on how I am feeling watching this at the moment.
It did make me so nostalgic for the 90s, though. I was just looking at all the fashion and the music, and I was like,
I love that you're the
"Oh."
person who watched that and just said, nostalgia.
miss
Take
the
me back
90s.
to these good times.
I really did. It's part of my identity crisis. I'm just like, oh God, the 90s, man. It was a time when you could burn down, you could tear down a light tower at a concert, and it was considered I mean, there is that amazing moment where it's an amateur footage of like these fucking bogans, or American equivalent of bogans, just like tearing down this mural. Like, there's just like miles and miles of this beautiful artwork done by artists on plywood. And these guys are just ripping it down. And there's some dude filming it going, woo, woo, this is history. Woohoo, this is history. And again, it's like one of those Simpsons moments. It's like, oh my God.
What do you most miss about that period of time, do you think, if you are nostalgic about it? Like, what is it about that world that, isn't in our current world?
I don't think it's about what was in the world. It was more where I was at that time.
Right.
I think it's more about the fact that I was discovering all these bands, and I sort of, to me, it was a mixture of cinema and music. They were the two things I was into, and it was like the indie film boom. It was like Tarantino and Kevin Smith, and being John Malkovich, and then it was the music, and I don't know. It's just more, that's what happens in life, is you have a period of time where you feel like the world was great and full of possibilities, and then you do your best to stay in that bubble for the rest of your life. And that's why we're in the cultural vacuum. To see the full video, join our Patreon.
Patreon.com/TOFOP.